the place where we turn complex blueprints for a better world into, well, actionable progressive knowledge.
Glad to be here.
If you're someone who looks at the global economy today with all its dizzying cycles, the booms and the busts, the inequality.
That's a lot.
It is. And if you feel deep down that there has to be some kind of fundamental structural fix, maybe even a mathematical path to stability, then today's deep dive is definitely for you.
I think so.
We've been handed some incredible source material. It details this really powerful foundational economic theory. It's a structural model, and yes, it's rooted in some specific historical observations, but the principles themselves, they feel absolutely timeless. They really demand a modern global application.
They really do.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to really extract the universal, the progressive solutions from this that can be applied everywhere.
Right.
We are genuinely looking for the blueprint for a world where economic life is, well, happy, stable, just, and fulfilled. A way to move past these outdated, centralized models toward a real economic equilibrium.
And what's so fascinating here is that it's not just some abstract theory or a critique of history.
No.
This source material provides a really rigorous, critical socioeconomic analysis that we desperately need today to address the imbalances we see everywhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, for the last century, we've been chasing prosperity, right? Defined almost purely by GDP growth.
Just make the number go up.
Exactly, make the number go up. But this blueprint, it reminds us that prosperity by itself, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Stability, which you can only get through structural balance, is the real key. It's the non-negotiable key to, long-term sustainability and human welfare.
So it's not just about growth, it's about the quality and shape of that growth.
Precisely. And this deep dive, it reveals actual mathematical requirements for that success. We're talking about specific percentages for labor, caps on industrial capacity, requirements for local planning.
Real numbers.
Real specific numbers that, when you meet them, create an economy that's inherently resilient. So we're going to analyze these numbers, but use modern global data to see how they apply. It's like taking this ancient wisdom and using it as a futuristic operating system upgrade for how we run our economies.
I love that. An OS upgrade. The current failure modes are, well, they're painfully clear. So now we explore the path to equilibrium. Let's do it. So to build that robust, that futuristic economy, we first have to learn from the past, right? We have to understand why prosperous societies, whether they were, ancient river valley civilizations or early industrial hubs, why they ultimately collapsed or just stagnated. The sources cite 3 primary reasons that cities or states lost their economic balance. And the incredible thing is how well they still apply today, just, in disguise.
They absolutely do. The first historical killer of balance was what the source calls a geographical or environmental shock.
A shock.
Yeah. The idea was that if a developed community was built along a river and that river suddenly changed its course, or maybe it dried up, the economy was immediately hit, and hit hard.
It's such a powerful analogy.
It is. And you're right, it's not just about literal rivers anymore.
No. Today, that river is any single, fragile, finite resource stream that an entire national economy relies on.
Right. Think about modern economies in, say, the Middle East or parts of Latin America that became just overwhelmingly reliant on fossil fuel export.
That's their river.
That's their river.
Yeah.
And when the global market for oil shifts, or when policy finally mandates a real transition to renewables, that economic river has effectively, dried up. It's changed direction for hundreds of communities.
Or think even more broadly. Think about supply chain choke points.
Oh, perfect example.
A single canal, like the Suez, gets blocked for a week.
Yeah.
Or a single factory in Taiwan that makes a specific microchip has a fire.
And suddenly, the river has changed course for industries all over the world.
Exactly. So that reliance on a monoculture, whether it's a physical resource or a single point of manufacturing, it creates that same fundamental vulnerability that the sources warned about. Resilience, then, has to mean diversification.
And localization.
Okay, so that's the first killer. What was the second?
The second historical killer of balance was the destruction of rural industry. The sources talk about what happened when industries moved away from these local kind of self-sufficient villages.
Yeah.
That delicate reciprocal balance between the decentralized rural communities and the urban centers, it just shattered.
And that is a perfect critique of modern centralized globalization.
It's exactly what happened when you systematically shift production overseas or you consolidate it into these massive automated mega factories far away, all to maximize shareholder profit.
You just obliterate the local economies, the local craftspeople, the small manufacturers. That whole circular, self-sufficient village economy is gone.
Think about the textile industries in the American South or traditional artisans in India or Africa when cheap, mass-produced goods flooded their markets.
Yeah.
The immediate result is always the same: local unemployment, deep poverty, and this unnatural stressed migration towards already overcrowded cities.
Which is a direct recipe for economic and social imbalance.
It's a catastrophe.
Okay, so that brings us to the third factor, which this one feels maybe the most corrosive because it's systemic, it's psychological.
Yes. The third factor is defective education and social systems. The sources explicitly link defects in rural education and social systems directly to economic imbalance.
And that's an incredibly progressive idea, isn't it? To say that economic health isn't just about monetary policy or tax rates.
It's about how you value labor. All labor, but especially manual and agricultural labor. If your education system is designed to steer basically everyone away from the farm, away from applied crafts, away from local industry.
And Sonnen tells them the only legitimate path is a quote-unquote white-collar job in a distant city.
Then you are actively contributing to structural failure. You're creating a psychological imbalance, a disconnect between the educated mind and the necessary work long before any financial crisis even hits.
So the system itself degrades its own foundation by teaching people that foundation is inferior. And that ensures the best minds leave the fields.
Exactly. Which brings us from the causes of the decline to one of the most visible symptoms.
Right, the numbers.
The numbers. The sources give a very specific numerical requirement for a sound, resilient economy.
Yes.
Only 30 to 40% of the working population should depend directly on agriculture.
Neither more nor less.
Neither more nor less. That's a very targeted range.
It is. Why is that range so critical for stability? What happens if you're outside of it?
Well, it's all about balance and efficiency. If the percentage drops much lower than 30%, agriculture gets neglected. You know, it might be highly mechanized, but it lacks that dedicated, localized human attention it needs. You risk food insecurity or becoming too reliant on monocultures. But the far more common problem, the one that plagues most developing nations today, is when that percentage balloons.
Right.
When it goes up to 70 or even 80%, like it did historically in places like Bengal, and we see today in parts of sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia.
And what does that do?
It places an absolutely unbearable strain on the land. It creates massive hidden unemployment, and it just crushes the per capita income for the vast majority of the population.
We see that 70 to 80% trap today, don't we? Where, you get this rapid centralized urbanization, but it's not matched by a decentralized industrialization.
Exactly. So agriculture just becomes the default low-wage job because all those local village industries we just talked about, they were ruined.
And this ties right back to the education system failure.
Perfectly. The psychological shift is dramatic. The educated young person in a rural area starts to see agricultural work, even farming their own family's land, as inferior, a sign of failure.
So they flock to the cities?
They flock to the cities, chasing this small number of so-called intellectual or white-collar jobs.
And the result is a disaster on both ends. You get soaring urban unemployment and poverty in the cities.
While at the same time, you have this critical shortage of educated, scientifically minded, high-skill labor in agriculture where it's desperately needed.
It's a devastating cycle.
Yeah.
The system devalues its own foundation and creates a dual crisis. A massive strain on the land, and this huge psychic strain on all the educated, unemployed people trapped in cities.
And this raises the really important question that the blueprint tries to answer directly.
Which is?
How do we fundamentally restructure the system to treat agriculture not as some kind of last resort, but as a scientifically based, technologically advanced industry?
Right. We need agricultural engineers, biotechnologists, logistics experts.
Modern data scientists. People who view the fields as the next frontier of innovation, not just a place for those who have no other options. The blueprint provides the exact mathematical framework to force that re-engineering of the entire labor structure.
Okay, so this is where the source material pivots.
Yeah.
It goes from diagnosis to prescription. It gets mathematically precise, and this is where it gets really illuminating. It lays out the exact ideal distribution of the working population that you need to ensure a balanced, resilient, and self-sufficient economy. This structure is the fix. It's the way out of that 70–80% trap.
And this framework, it's radical because of its clarity. It mandates localization and a real interdependence between all the different sectors.
Okay, let's lay this blueprint out clearly for everyone listening. This specific breakdown of 100% of the working population is the core of the argument for stability.
Let's do it.
So first, agriculture. It has to be between 30 and 40% of the people who are directly dependent on it.
Right. This ensures you have enough valued labor for highly productive, scientifically managed food production, but you're not overburdening the land or the workers.
Okay, 30 to 40%. Then we shift to the industrial sectors that are directly linked to agriculture. This is the key to local prosperity.
Yes. And each of these should stabilize at 20%.
20% each.
20% each. First, you have agro-industries.
Agro-industries.
These are the industries that are focused on processing the agricultural output locally. So we're talking about modern, clean flour mills, advanced food processing plants, making local paper or fiber, oil extraction, herbal medicine factories.
So you're capturing the value added right there instead of shipping raw goods away.
You keep it local. That's the key.
Okay, so that's agro-industries at 20%. What's the second 20%?
The second is agrico-industries.
Agrico.
Right. These industries focus entirely on supporting and technologically enhancing agriculture.
So making the tools for the farm.
Exactly. The localized production of high-tech tools, sustainable equipment, tractors, irrigation systems, technology that's actually tailored to the region's specific farming needs. This ensures that the 30–40% of people in agriculture have the best possible tools built right next door.
That is such a tightly integrated system. So that's 40% in ag, 20% in agro, 20% in agrito. We're at 80%.
We are. The final two sectors support that whole superstructure. General trade and commerce takes 10%.
Okay.
That ensures the efficient movement of all the goods being produced by that 80% agricultural and industrial base.
And the last 10%?
The last 10% is for intellectual or white-collar jobs. This guarantees you have enough administrators, educators, healthcare professionals, public sector workers, and innovators. But it prevents that massive intellectual unemployment we talked about. It doesn't draw too much labor away from the primary production sectors.
Wow. So that's the breakdown, 40, 20, 20, 10, 10. It's profound because it forces the rebalancing. It makes the field and the factory fundamentally linked, interdependent, and locally relevant.
It does.
But I have a question here because there's another key metric in the sources that we need to clarify.
Yes, and this is an important distinction.
Before we move on, let's get absolute clarity on the industrial terms. We just defined agro and agrico-industries, which are all about being locally integrated.
Correct. So the key differentiation we need to make is the definition of non-agricultural industries, or NAI.
NAI.
Yes. Agro and agrico-industries are locally embedded. They're tied directly to producing and processing food and farm support. That's your decentralized industrial base.
Okay. So what are non-agricultural industries?
NAI are defined as industries that are not directly related to agriculture. These are your large-scale, foundational, typically centralized sectors.
Like steel plants.
Exactly. Massive steel plants, national oil refineries, primary metal industries, large-scale salt production, centralized non-herbal pharmaceuticals. They're necessary for national self-sufficiency, but they represent a potentially huge centralized industrial power.
And this NAI category, this is the ultimate measure of industrial health and balance, according to the sources. It dictates geopolitical stability.
It does. The sources state that the percentage of people engaged in non-agricultural industries must be kept within a very specific range, 20 to 30% of the total population for a truly balanced socioeconomic structure.
Okay, now this is where I think we need to help the listener clarify the math.
Let's do it.
In that first model, the 40-20, 20-20, 10-10, we allocated 40% to agro and agrico industries.
Right.
So if NAI has to be 20 to 30%, does that mean we're adding more industry on top of that first model? Or is NAI an overall cap?
That is the most critical distinction. The 40-20, 20-20, 10-10 framework. That is the ideal labor allocation for your local self-sufficient economic units, for your blocks. That adds up to 100% of the people in that block.
Okay.
The NAI metric, that 20 to 30%, that acts as a geopolitical and structural cap on centralized heavy industry at the regional or national level.
I see. So it's a different measurement.
It's a control mechanism. It's the check and balance that prevents a nation from becoming a centralized industrial monster.
So the NAI 20 to 30% range, it represents the maximum allowable strain that can be placed on the economy by large, centralized, non-local heavy industry. It ensures that the diversified local economy, the agro and agrico-industries, remains the dominant base.
Exactly right. If the total labor devoted to heavy, non-local industry goes above 30%, you've tipped the scales. You're in the over-industrialized danger zone.
So it's the Goldilocks zone of industrialization.
It's the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, where you become a resource predator, and not too cold, where you become an economic satellite. Just right for resilience, for internal peace, and for national sovereignty.
And that analysis of the NAI band, that feels like the most globally relevant and, frankly, predictive part of the whole blueprint.
I agree. The blueprint isn't arguing for some kind of primitive, underdeveloped world. It's arguing for optimal balance. And it clearly defines the dangers of falling outside that stable 20-30% NAI band. It predicts both dependency and aggression.
Okay, let's break down those two dangers. What happens on the low end? The danger of underindustrialization with NAI below 20%.
Well, the consequences are stark.
Yeah.
And they go way beyond just poverty. You see low per capita income, a low standard of living, and, very limited purchasing capacity for consumer goods locally. But crucially, this industrial deficit creates a fundamental, dangerous trade imbalance that defines the nation's place in the world.
How so?
Because the local population has low purchasing power, their import index stays low, they can't afford to buy things, so they're forced to just export their cheap raw materials.
I see.
This inability to process their own raw goods into finished products forces the area to become and this is a direct quote, a satellite of a developed country.
And we don't have to look very far for modern examples of that.
Not at all.
Think of any single commodity economy in Central America or Sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow.
They might have rich agricultural lands or essential minerals, but without the industrial capacity to refine or process them.
They're just forced to sell their raw goods for pennies on the dollar and then buy back expensive consumer goods and technology from the industrialized powers.
It's a dependency trap.
It is, and this industrial dependence, it jeopardizes the global balance of power. The economically subservient nation has very little geopolitical leverage. Their policies are often dictated by the needs of their industrial trading partners.
And the competition among the developed nations to control these satellites, that increases the possibility of conflict.
Absolutely. The underlying goal of this whole blueprint is clear. Real sovereignty is achieved through self-sufficiency, and that self-sufficiency is maintained by a balanced industrial profile.
Okay, so that's the danger of being under-industrialized. Now, what about the other side of the coin? The danger of over-industrialization, where NAI goes above 30%.
Here's where the blueprint turns into this profound warning about the human cost of unchecked, centralized growth. An over-industrialized country is inherently unstable. It's unstable because its industrial capacity is way bigger than its local market's ability to consume and its local resource base's ability to supply.
So it's constantly hungry.
Constantly. It needs two things to survive: a constant stream of cheap raw materials and constantly expanding markets to sell its finished goods.
And to get those, it has to become aggressive.
It has to. It has to control or grab productive agricultural regions or other countries, turning them into resource satellites. And it has to control industrially undeveloped countries to use them as a captive market for its products.
This sounds familiar.
It's the story of colonialism and neocolonialism. And this predatory behavior means the country is fundamentally reliant on external, unsustainable growth.
So the moment those external markets shrink, which they always do during global recessions or political crises,
the over-industrialized nation suffers a severe economic depression and soaring unemployment. The sources argue this is what creates the war psychosis and saber-rattling in the world today.
And here's where that really sharp ethical critique comes in.
Yes, the sources are very clear on this. They assert there is fundamentally no difference between a centralized communist country and a liberal democratic one when they become over-industrialized.
Their behavior is the same.
Their behavior is the same. Both are equally aggressive in their search for the kamadhenu?
The mythological cow.
The mythological cow that yields the maximum output with the minimum investment. It's a perfect description of the modern corporate search for outsourcing labor and raw materials at the absolute lowest cost, maximizing profit while feeding the cow the bare minimum.
That relentless exploitative drive is catastrophic enough externally. But the sources make an even more staggering claim about what it does internally.
They do. Beyond the global aggression, over-industrialization leads to these incredibly harmful internal consequences. It affects personal, social, and national health. It causes a gradual individual and collective psychic degeneration.
A psychic epidemic.
The risk of a full-blown psychic epidemic. And this is a deep concept we have to unpack.
Yeah, why would heavy industrialization cause psychic degeneration?
Because the system fosters centralization, disconnection, and hypercompetition. I mean, look at any highly centralized, overstressed urban center in the world today. The intense anxiety, the crushing loneliness, the massive rise in mental health issues, the opioid crises, that pervasive feeling of meaninglessness in so many corporate jobs.
It all connects back to this predicted psychic strain.
It connects directly. The system prioritizes machine output over human fulfillment, and that creates a deep cognitive dissonance and social fragmentation.
So the source is arguing that striving for infinite, centralized, unbalanced industrial growth literally destroys the society from the inside out.
It's a self-consuming machine, and the labor warning in the sources really cements this point.
What's the warning?
An industrial system that depends heavily on a large, transient, floating population of outside laborers. People who are constantly moving in for low wages because the local economy can't sustain them.
Yeah.
That system will experience rapidly increasing psychic degeneration locally. It will have permanent food scarcity as resources get strained, and it will have contracting local markets.
And we see this everywhere today. In any hyper-developed urban center, from Silicon Valley to mega cities in Asia, that relies on these vast, low-wage, temporary or migrant labor forces to function.
Yes. The local workers can't afford to live there anymore, but the essential services require masses of people commuting for hours or living in these precarious conditions.
So the wealthy locals aren't stable, the transient workers aren't stable. The social contract is completely broken.
The over-industrialized economy cannibalizes its own social fabric. And so the solution has to be urgent and it has to be structural. We have to re-engineer the system to bring it back into that stable 20-30% NAI band by embedding industry locally and responsibly. That's how you stabilize the population, the economy, and the collective psyche.
Okay, so if the diagnosis is centralization and imbalance, and the goal is this structural equilibrium, how do we actually implement this? The blueprint demands some very specific, localized, and optimistic actions.
It does, and it starts with the foundation.
Agriculture.
First and foremost, the agricultural system must be restructured and treated with respect as a fully functional industry.
Which means prices can't be determined by the whims of speculative markets or predatory debt collectors.
Exactly. Prices have to be determined by calculating income, expenses, and necessities. A kind of cost-plus model that ensures parity pricing for the producer.
So the price of what a farmer produces, whether it's rice or wheat or anything else, has to be indexed to their cost of living and the cost of their inputs.
Yes. That's systemic exploitation where farmers are forced to sell their harvest at throwaway prices just to pay off debt. That has to end. That is what guarantees perpetual poverty for the majority.
So the core goal is achieving this engineered adjustment between agriculture, industry, and commerce.
Right. To create an equilibrium where the primary producers are respected, they're scientifically supported, and they're compensated fairly as industrial partners. And this requires proactive government planning and credit allocation that favors the local farming cooperative.
Okay, that leads to the next solution, which is a key progressive directive about self-reliance.
Yes. This is a foundational principle for resilience and for geopolitical peace. The source is adamant about this. No country or bloc should depend on imported raw materials for its fundamental industrial development.
That's a strong statement.
It's a very strong statement. It says, any genuine industrial revolution that wants to have enduring stability must be based on indigenous raw materials available within the socio-economic unit itself.
So prosperity is grounded locally and permanently.
Yes. If a region doesn't have local iron ore, it shouldn't build its entire economy around massive centralized steel production that requires constant foreign imports.
It needs to pivot.
It needs to pivot. It should build its economy around the resources it does have. Maybe that's unique agricultural outputs that can be processed in agro-industries. Maybe it's specialized craftsmanship or locally generated renewable energy.
It's like building a secure house with locally sourced stone and wood, not ordering fragile specialized components from halfway around the globe.
That's a perfect analogy. It maximizes local value chains, it minimizes geopolitical dependency, and it dramatically enhances true economic liberty. It's the ultimate antidote to the supply chain fragility that we've seen cripple the globe in recent years.
This emphasis on radical localization, it all culminates in what seems to be the ultimate structural tool.
Yes, block-level planning. The source champions this as the only genuinely effective, realistic way to solve chronic unemployment and achieve permanent full employment globally.
And you have to remember the sheer size and diversity of modern nations.
Yeah.
Centralized planning from a distant capital, whether it's Washington, D.C., or Beijing, or New Delhi, it just can't work.
It can account for the minute, specific needs and resources of every small community. Planning at the level of a local block unit of just a few thousand people offers immediate practical benefits that centralized planning can never match.
The source lays out 5 core benefits, right?
It does. First, because the planning area is small, the local planners fully understand the local problems and resources intimately. They know what's abundant and what's needed.
Okay.
Second, local leadership is empowered to solve problems according to their own local priorities, not some generalized national agenda that might not even apply to them.
Third, because the unit is small, the planning is just vastly more practical, it's more effective, and you get quick, observable results. You can see the impact on unemployment and local purchasing power almost immediately.
Fourth, you get real buy-in. Local sociocultural bodies, leaders, cooperative movements, they mobilize the human and material resources actively. It fosters a true sense of collective ownership and democratic oversight of development.
And the 5th benefit is the ultimate goal.
It's the ultimate goal. This local industry growth solves unemployment. It enhances local purchasing capacity by creating localized wealth cycles, and it permanently establishes the base for a balanced economy right at the grassroots level. This is the pragmatic, step-by-step path to full employment.
And this local approach must also tackle that issue of the floating population.
Absolutely. That floating population, millions of people constantly moving for precarious work, often without permanent roots or social security, is a massive systemic problem in unbalanced, centralized economies.
And the instability has to be handled where it originates.
At the block level, the solution is twofold. That floating population either needs to be permanently settled and integrated into new, stable, local employment in the area where they are, or they should be supported to return to their original region, where new block-level development can then sustain them there with dignity. We can't just ignore the instability of these massive temporary labor pools. They're a systemic risk, and they foster that psychic degeneration we talked about.
So creating local economic balance, fueled by indigenous resources, actively eliminates the need for people to constantly migrate just for economic survival.
That's the goal.
And all of these corrections, the NAI limits, the 40-20-20 2-4-10 ratio, the block-level planning, they all lead to one singular progressive goal.
Economic democracy. The source makes it clear that humanity has to consciously choose between two fundamentally different paths.
Let's just confront the reality of the status quo. Economic power today is concentrated in the hands of a very few. In liberal democracies, it's controlled by a handful of huge capitalists and corporations. In socialist countries, it's a small group of party leaders directing state monopolies.
In either system, a tiny fraction of the population is manipulating the welfare of the entire society.
And the choice presented to people is profound. You have to choose between political democracy, which is built on a centralized economy, or genuine economic democracy built on a decentralized one.
And the source argues so powerfully that political democracy, the right to cast a vote every few years, it simply can't fulfill human hopes and aspirations like guaranteed necessities or dignified work without economic democracy being established first.
True liberty requires economic control by the people, organized locally.
Right. Without economic power, political rights are largely illusory. The centralized economy, whether it's run by the state or by corporations, always dictates the terms of the political conversation.
And this decentralized vision is fundamentally at odds with the capitalist structure.
It's incompatible because capitalism is philosophically designed to maximize profit above all else. Capitalists will always aim to produce at the lowest possible cost, which often means exploiting labor and resources, and sell at the highest possible profit. And that leads directly to centralization and deep economic disparity.
So the guiding principle of this decentralized economy, as the source material lays it out, is a revolutionary shift in focus.
It's production for consumption, not production for profit.
And that changes everything.
It's a seismic shift. If your goal is consumption, meaning meeting the local needs of your population, then your measure of efficiency is how well those needs are met, not the quarterly return for a distant shareholder.
And the result of that shift?
Life-changing. The guaranteed minimum requirements of life are met for everyone. All regions get ample scope to develop their unique economic potential based on their own indigenous resources. This systemic shift eliminates the structural drivers of overcrowding and the floating population crisis because prosperity is inherently distributed.
To make sure this economic democracy isn't just theory, but a functional system, the source details a three-tiered structure for industrial management. This is the mechanism that vests economic welfare directly in the people.
Exactly. It's how you terminate the supremacy of centralized leaders.
So what's the first tier?
First, you have the key industries. These are the foundational strategic sectors for the whole economy, power generation, heavy transport infrastructure, maybe large-scale strategic resource extraction.
And who manages those?
They have to be managed by the local government structure, and they have to be guided strictly by the principle of no profit, no loss.
That no profit, no loss mandate is fascinating. It means these essential services aren't used to generate revenue for the state or for private individuals.
Right. It prevents political manipulation and price gouging. They're financed through necessary government fees and general taxation, ensuring they operate efficiently for the benefit of the community, not to generate centralized private wealth.
Okay, so that's key industries. What's the second tier, which you said is the core engine of the economy?
Medium-scale industries. These should be managed entirely as cooperatives.
Cooperatives.
Yes. They should form the main sector of the entire economy. This would be the vast majority of those agro and agrico-industries we talked about. And crucially, they shouldn't be guided by monopoly production and profit, but by livelihood and local control.
So the workers and the community own the businesses.
Cooperatives are the best way to organize local people independently, guarantee their livelihood, democratize investment decisions, and let them control their own economic welfare.
So decisions about, say, buying new machinery or reinvesting profits into local social services, those are made by the workers in the community themselves, not some distant board of directors.
It's economic power at the most personal level.
And the third tier, smallest one.
Small-scale and cottage industries. These would be managed by individual owners, so you still have that element of personal initiative and entrepreneurship.
But there's a catch.
There is. They must be confined mainly to non-essential commodities. Luxury items, personalized services, niche crafts, and while they're privately owned, they have to maintain proper adjustment with the cooperative sector.
And that adjustment is the key. That's the regulation. It prevents the small-scale private sector from growing into an exploitative monopoly.
Exactly. It ensures that essential goods, food, shelter, clothing, tools remain governed by the cooperative principle, while entrepreneurship gets channeled into non-critical luxury consumption. It's a genius structure. It terminates concentrated economic power and channels human ambition toward creativity, not exploitation. It's a truly progressive, futuristic vision for economic governance.
So to synthesize the core takeaway from this incredible blueprint, we have to emphasize that economic decentralization does not mean going back to some primitive, low-tech state.
Not at all. On the contrary, it demands maximum development and maximum decentralization in every sector of the economy, agriculture, industry, commerce, using the best available science and technology, but always focused locally.
The ultimate challenge facing vast nations today is that they simply cannot achieve stability or ethical development while huge majorities of their populations are either strained by undervalued agriculture or trapped in these centralized systems.
The percentages must shift, and it has to happen through deliberate, localized, indigenous industrial development and block-level planning.
So what does this all mean for us today? The blueprint offers a clear and, I think, an optimistic path.
I agree. True. Balanced economic stability, that 40-20-21-0-10 structure controlled by the 20-30% NAI cap, is the essential pathway to ending the structural drivers of global conflict, reversing that collective psychic degeneration, and fulfilling the mission for a just and happy life for all of humanity in this very lifespan. This is the progressive way forward.
And this shift toward a balanced economy, it starts with us. It starts with demanding this change at the block level in our own communities and thinking critically in terms of indigenous resource development and localized cooperative control. It's an economic revolution that we have to collectively champion.
It is.
The vision presented in this source material is just. It's a comprehensive, optimistic path toward a world where economic power truly rests with the people, not a handful of centralized elites.
And if this blueprint for a decentralized, progressive, and balanced world resonates with you, if you believe in economic democracy and cooperative management and block-level self-reliance, we'd encourage you to follow the thinkers and movements that are dedicated to establishing this economic model.
Yeah.
This isn't just theory. It's a practical, optimistic path to a better future, and it's based on these enduring principles of human dignity.
So we encourage you to look at your own local economy tonight through the lens of those percentages. Ask yourself, is the industry in my community locally owned? Is agriculture respected as a high-tech industry here? What happens when my local river shifts direction? Start thinking locally. Start acting collectively. We hope this deep dive helps you move toward making this world a better place for everyone to live a happy and just life and to fulfill the mission of their lives, right here, right now.